Hey,
Hi, and how are you?
how's it going? All good?
Nice haircut.
See?
Did you
Yeah,
share? Did you shave yourself?
yeah, I did.
Fantastic. Yeah. How's things over there?
Well, not that good, I guess. I mean,
Uh,
we're not we're the wave has finally hit us, you know.
Good. Okay. Right.
Yeah. So I've had the clinic closed for about 5 weeks now.
5 weeks. Okay.
Yeah,
What was it?
yeah, four,
Because I
four,
know
four
that
to five.
4 or 5.
Sorry?
Because I know that in Brazil, it's not a compulsory lockdown initially. Yeah.
No, it is. It became a compulsory lockdown in São Paulo and a few other cities, but it's not mandatory by the president. By the Each city has decided their way and for how long.
I
But
see. So far, Sao Paulo has been closed for 5 weeks.
yeah, that's part of the good news here.
Uh,
I mean, the population is doing what it was supposed to.
right.
Of course, we always have a few people that don't care about it, but I think it's going better than I expected, actually.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's sort of under control in Sao Paulo,
Yeah, I wouldn't say under control. I think it's
right?
hard to say under control, but close to it. Yeah, for sure.
Uh, how
Um,
about Rio? Is Rio closed at all?
it's supposed to be the same in Sao Paulo,
Right.
but it actually isn't. No, I
Oh
think
my.
Rio
Okay.
is. I think people in Rio, it took them a little longer from what I'm seeing, and a
Okay.
few other cities. The thing is now, and of course we can go to that, is that in Brazil now we have politics involved in the
Right.
situation in a way that it's just absurd. You
Right.
know, I mean, of course, you have in England, you have Boris Johnson saying one thing and then he gets infected. And, you know, of course, politics are always involved. But in Brazil, it's just ridiculous. I mean, people will get their opinions, they will act according to their opinion instead of science, you know,
I
which is
see.
very complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they don't understand how the politics in is in Brazil. Can you just tell us what's happening and
Yeah,
why are they
well,
doing that?
the situation now in Brazil, I got a few numbers here.
Right.
We've had 2,000 deaths, more or less, so far. About 200 in the past 24 hours. So we are
Holy
peaking
smokes.
now.
Right.
Uh, we have registered 30,000 cases, but that is just
Mm-hmm.
absurd. It is way more than that.
Right.
The amount of tests being done in Brazil is just ridiculous. I mean, I don't even pay attention to the curve anymore, to the graphics, because it is not reality at all.
Right.
So the
In,
only thing that it's kind of close to the truth is the amount of deaths,
right.
because you know, in the end, most cases are being reported accurately, but only regarding deaths. I wouldn't say this about the amount of people infected. We are not doing many tests. Brazil lacks a lot on money for research.
Right.
So now that we have a situation like this, we don't make the kits, we don't have the proper lab material to perform in large amounts, as opposed to Germany, for example.
Right.
So the situation here is a bit more complicated. We have some things that I've noticed that are quite interesting. The impact of obesity. I don't know
Right.
if you noticed that in Malaysia, but the impact of obesity as a
Oh, we
major risk.
We have lots of obesity
Yeah.
cases here, so I think
Yeah,
it's
well,
something that
obesity now is something that it's all over the
it's
world.
pandemic.
It's a
It is
pandemic,
pandemic.
exactly. It kills a lot more than the virus.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Right.
Diabetes as well, it's a major factor. But the thing is, in Brazil, we have a population with less elderly people than Europe,
Right.
which it's due to the poverty in Brazil, of course, but now it comes as a positive thing, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the amount of elderly people in Italy is about 22 to 25%, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
and in
Right.
Brazil is about 8%.
Right.
So it's a lot
And
less.
yeah, and most of the death you see, the 2,000 plus death that you see, is it more concentrated into the elderlies, or it's more on the young people with some comorbidities, or it's hitting mostly the slum areas that people just kind of gather around a lot?
Yeah, the situation now in Brazil is that we have a lot more of young people getting infected, and there are different reasons for that proportion. Of course, if we don't have as many elderly people, then of course the proportion is going to be different. But there are also other
Right.
reasons. I mean, the good thing, I mean, the positive sides about Brazil in this situation are the three main, in my opinion, are first of all, we have a younger population, which is good for a situation
Hmm.
like this. It's not a
Right.
good sign as a country, but it is a good situation in a for now. The
Right.
other thing is the climate. We don't know exactly how much of it is due to the climate, but we would expect less as a less contagious environment in a climate like Brazil. Last month it was super warm. This month it started to get cold now, but it was super
Oh.
warm. We had very sunny days, which
Hmm.
helps. We all know it helps with influenza, and so we kind of knew that this was a good thing.
Right.
Um, and the third and most important part is that because we are so far from China, we had a little bit of time to understand things by learning from other doctors' mistakes in China and in Europe. So we I think we were a little bit more informed about the
Right.
disease when it finally arrived here. So that is
Right.
so I'm very thankful to the doctors in Asia and Europe for starting things up before the
Right.
disease arrived. But since it arrived, I've learned so much about it. I mean, when this thing started, we all thought it was exclusively it was a pulmonary
Asian.
disease,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it really isn't. There's this very interesting study being done at the Hospital das Clínicas, which is the biggest hospital in Latin America. It's where I graduated, and I'm
Right.
so proud of my professors there because
Right.
they came up with a protocol now that they've been testing, which is very simple, just using heparin. And they started this protocol now, and they're getting really good results. They're going to publish it for sure. They just want to get more patients to publish it in in a strong paper, which is something
Right.
that we're not seeing right now. People get 8 patients and
Right.
they're publishing on New England. It's crazy.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but the thing is, they noticed that it was a beautiful, beautiful lecture that I saw from one of the professors. That these guys are geniuses from the ICU. Um,
Right.
they started noticing thrombosis on patients.
Right.
So
The
they would see,
microthrombosis. Right.
yeah. So they would
Right.
notice, cyanoctic distal
Finding.
phalange and they just asked the pathologist to perform biopsies during the autopsies
Right.
uh, of the pulmonary parenchyma, and
Right.
they noticed several thrombi. And
Right.
because of that, they thought like, oh, this is, this is probably disseminated intravascular coagulation, DIC.
Right. Right.
And they started treating the patients with heparin. So they, when patients needed to stay in the hospital, now they're
Right.
getting Clexane and enoxaparin, 80 milligrams a day, which is a full
Right.
dose. And
Right.
if they go to ICU, if they go down, then they get a full dose so that their coagulation, the INR, is about 2. And they're getting really good results. The amount of days that the patients stay in the ICU has reduced at about 60%, if I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
which is crazy.
Right.
And
Right.
the mortality rate has decreased. So I'm really
Right.
proud of that. New protocols are
That's good.
coming up, and it's definitely
Right.
an hematological disease.
Right.
So yeah.
So you're saying using aspirin, it's also anti-inflammatory. I think this whole thing actually also involves a lot of cytokine storm that also leads to all this microthrombosis. And do you think that having aspirin there is also helping fighting the anti-inflammatory part
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah, I think that all sorts of anticoagulants should be tested. They're doing this protocol with heparin, which is really fast, and most doctors know how to use it, which is
Right.
very good, and they're getting really
Right.
good results. So
Right.
I'm trying to stay positive here.
That's good.
Yeah,
But how,
and
how about the situation right now is in like there's not a lot of places being shut down, and you talk about the test kits and contact sort of tracing. Is it done in the whole country? I know Brazil is very huge. It's a big country. It's so
yeah.
hard to go to every single, even to into the forest. And what is the government doing so far?
Yeah, the situation here is that, of course, geographically speaking, it's very difficult for us because the country is huge, of course. But the most important issues are not regarding, the logistics of the country itself. The thing is that we have a president that I think he's the only president in the entire planet who's against the isolation, right?
No,
For
we know
me,
some president. We know someone who is against it too.
what?
We know someone who's against it too. In your northern part of the country, who thinks who wants to open the country very soon?
Exactly. The thing is, um, it is a political move because we all know that there's going to be a huge recession after the pandemic. It is going to be huge. It's going to be probably the worst we've ever seen in the history of civilization for all countries. This is not something new. The thing that amazes me is how irresponsible the guy can be by saying, like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this because it's going to ruin the economy. And he's doing that so that when the economy goes down, as it is, of course, he's going to say, like, I told you so. And
Right,
it's just so wrong in so many ways. It is so irresponsible to do that. We need the lockdown now, of course, and we need to come up with a plan of, opening afterwards so that the economy can go back. But of course, there's a equilibrium. The $1 million question here is when, right? But it's not one or another. So this
right,
became a very political thing in Brazil. So if you say that it is important to stop the lockdown soon,
right,
people will be against you or in favor of your opinion just based on what the president is saying and not science, right? Not
right,
math, not
right,
listening to experts, both from an economical perspective and also from a healthcare perspective. So people are taking this into very opposite directions, which is just wrong. I hate my president, I don't think we need to stop the lockdown now. Of course not.
Right.
But at the same time, I know that we can't stay like this until next year
Right.
because the country will just fall apart. Uh,
Right.
I noticed so many.
But
I mean, the inequality in Brazil is so huge,
right.
and I started to pay attention to the people who are complaining the most, and of course, you have the elite complaining a lot of how the stock market went down and all,
Yeah.
and it's just absolutely ridiculous because if you I googled how many people in Brazil actually have money in the stock market.
Yeah.
Of course, I know that the stock market going up and down involves everybody, not only people who are the players there, right? Of
Right.
course, I know that. But fun fact here, 0.29% of our population has money in the stock market. Just 0.29% of the population. We have more
Right.
people incarcerated in
Right.
Brazil than people who actually have money in the stock market.
Right.
And these guys are saying like, oh, this is terrible, we need to
Right.
stop this, we shouldn't even have started the lockdown.
Right.
And I'm saying, you're 0.29% of the population.
Exactly.
If
Yeah.
you're losing 5% of your portfolio in the stock market, well, guess
Right.
what? We have dozens of millions of people in Brazil who are actually starving now. So they're just as
Exactly.
worried, or I would say even more worried about the
Yes.
economy than you are,
Yeah, this in from what I know is because when I was in Sao Paulo and then they was talking about a lot of social unrest in Rio, where a lot of people actually live by hand to mouth. They don't really have a lot of savings, and would you think that this, if ever this can become a very big issue, that there will be a lot of social unrest? And will the lockdown be something that will trigger it, or what do you think?
Yeah, the thing is, violence has already increased in Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah,
Is it in Sao Paulo itself or outside of it?
all over, all over. But I do have reliable information about São Paulo and Rio, and
Right,
the violence is peaking already, and so it is tricky. And I do agree that when we take into consideration economy versus virus, right? When do we stop the
right,
lockdown? We have to take all this into consideration. But that
right.
does not mean that we should do what the president says and just, stop everything and
Exactly,
pretend nothing is happening.
exactly.
Um, it is super complicated. I really don't know what would be my answer if I was into
That,
politics. If I
yeah,
had to make decisions now, it is a really tricky situation. But the problem
yeah.
is,
The
politics in
situation
Brazil
is
now.
quite bad, right?
Yeah, situation is
If you look
horrible
at,
now.
yeah, if you could look at the whole South America, the Latin Americans, it's half. It's a well, Brazil has about 30,000, close to 30,000 diagnosed, and it's almost half of the whole South American population. If you look at the whole, probably it's about 60,000 altogether. And if you look at that death rate, it's so much higher compared to around you. So isn't it a very worrisome for everybody just wanting to get this over and sort of shut it down and try to calm it down as soon as possible?
Yeah, it is complicated in Brazil for a number of reasons. I mean, we have a lot of people with very poor education. So it is difficult for people to understand what's going on. Not many people have access to information.
Information.
And
Yeah.
to make things worse, we're in a situation where fake news became a thing. So, I mean,
Yeah, it's everywhere.
everything that comes up, you have to
Right,
triple check,
right,
because it's awful. It is really awful. I mean, you get all the time. I'm talking to both friends who are doctors and then friends who are not doctors, and I'm always trying to say like, whoa, 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 that is not true. It's not actually that. Oh no, 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 no. It's difficult. It is difficult, and
Right.
I don't blame anyone. It's so hard for you to understand what's really going on and have reliable sources. To be honest, I don't spend much time on WhatsApp and Instagram and the average media because it's just, you know, it's
Too
just
much.
so much stuff that it's
Too much.
unreliable that
Yeah.
it comes up.
Right.
Yeah. So I
And
don't.
and yeah, are you closing down the borders? I mean, are the other countries closing down the
Yeah.
borders so less people moving around?
Yeah. The borders have been 100% closed for at least 2 weeks now, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a
Okay,
bit more than that.
right.
Yeah.
How about in Sao Paulo? Are all these cities closed down to outsiders as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay,
not from people from Brazil. I mean,
right.
you can go from one city to another here,
Okay.
but I was amazed. I thought that because the thing is, I lived in Southeast Asia for 1 year,
Right. You were
right?
in Bali.
I spent quite some time in Thailand and Vietnam
Indonesia.
and Indonesia and India and Nepal.
Right.
Anyway, the thing is, the presence of the state is much stronger in Asian countries, much
Mm,
stronger. So in situations where you need to direct the population towards one direction, I think it works better in Asia than in Brazil. You know, people are just not used to following the rules of the government because it's always a mess, and there are a lot of cultural explanations for that.
right.
um, so I was really worried that nobody would go for this because we don't have such strong presence of the state in Brazil,
Right.
but it actually went better than I expected, which is far from good. Let's just put it that way.
Right. But I think when you come down to life and death, when people around you started to kind of have people who contracted that, and there are some people dying from it, I think there will instill some fear among the whole population, just like what we've seen in Europe and in Italy and Spain, when you see people you know, and even UK, people you know got coronavirus, they die, and then you start to worry, well, what will that happen to me? Will that happen to me?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, even doctors, you know, who were supposed to be
Mm,
scientists, you know,
right.
in the end, we are all scientists.
Yes.
We still have this mindset of working because of fear. You know,
Right.
fear is what drives people towards a certain direction, and
Exactly.
which really shouldn't be the way. But I really see that happening in Brazil very strongly. I mean, from both sides. When you see people who are in favor of our president,
Right.
they're using fear to
Medical situation,
yeah,
right?
to explain why their opinion is this or that, right? And
Right.
you see the same thing happening um, with left wing people who are totally against the president. They're also using fear to convince others of what the right direction is, and this is not healthy at all. This explains a lot. You know, I have so many friends now who had anxiety crisis at home because we're driven by fear. You know,
Right.
everything that it's on the news is just pure fear. You know,
Yeah.
it is so common to see when you open our local CNN here,
Right.
webpage, the first
Right.
thing you see is, oh, this 29-year-old girl was getting married next week, but now she's in the ICU.
Right.
Like, what's the point here? You know, what is the
Right.
point? Why do you need to do that? You
Right.
know, why don't we talk about facts in a much greater scale?
True.
You know,
True.
so the media is working a lot with uh, with cases that just don't respond to the reality. Of course, we have somewhere in a country now a 15-year-old who died from coronavirus. We do have that. We not only
Right.
one, but two or three. I don't know. But the
Right.
thing is, if we get these cases and write huge stories about it, you know, what's the
Yeah.
point?
Exactly. Yeah. But and so now Sao Paulo is the most developed city, one of the most developed city in Brazil, in South Latin America. So is it setting an example how it should be? And are you getting a lot of test kit from maybe China or aid from China to help to test more and do more contact tracing right now?
Yeah, that's the mandatory thing to do now. You know,
Okay.
test everybody, right? And
Right.
especially people who are gonna get the IgG positive, you know, so they can go back to work, you know, and so if we're talking about getting the economy again, you know, we have to test everybody first.
Sure.
That's the
Yeah.
main thing.
Right.
So we didn't have tests at all in Brazil. Now they're starting to arrive, so things are
Right.
improving a little bit,
Okay.
and hopefully we will get as many people tested as possible. The other
Mm.
problem that I forgot to mention from the difference between Asian countries and Latin American countries, especially, is uh, we don't have the habit of wearing masks,
Right.
right? Nobody will ever wear a mask in Brazil unless they are
Not even.
inside the hospital doing a
Right.
surgery or something. You know, you
Right.
don't see people doing that at all, right?
Right.
And if you go to Vietnam, for example, a normal day in Vietnam, if you go on a busy highway, people will wear masks the whole day, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think that Asian countries had a much better result by flattening the curve with the use of masks.
Yeah. I think one thing that happens here that changed how we behave is SARS. We had SARS before, and that was one thing that changed quite a bit of how people actually react, and also and that itself, especially when it comes to Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Japan, Korea, is that people has this habit of wearing masks after SARS because of that fear. I think it's not it's also developed for the past few years, especially right after SARS. But like you say, yes, if you look at how in Asia, it is okay that someone wear masks to go out. I think it will be fearful for some that, especially in the West, if someone wear mask, people will think that is he up to no good or is he really
Yeah, I
sick?
mean, if you see somebody wearing a mask in Brazil, they will probably say, "Oh, this person probably has cancer and is doing chemotherapy," you know.
Right, right.
So
But do you
it's
think it will change? Do you think it will change for the years to come?
no,
But
I don't.
one thing that's worrisome because now South America is going into winter. Are you guys nervous because then now it's getting warmer in the north and then it's getting colder in the south?
Yeah, well, I always hope for sunny days here now,
Right.
especially. And the good thing is that our winter is far from being a European winter. So
Okay.
that helps. I mean,
All right.
we in São Paulo, for example, we do have cities that get cold, but in São Paulo, people will say it's freezing cold if it's 14, 15 degrees Celsius. People will say that it's super cold, you know. So it is not that bad. I mean, usually our
Okay.
winter in São Paulo will be around 18 to 22 degrees, which is
Right.
really not much, right?
Right.
So I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to be a major difference,
Right.
but I did enjoy the fact that we had really sunny days
That's
until
good.
this week. Yeah.
Yeah. And so far, when we look at all the clusters and all the cities that hit very hard, is that it always happens in very condensed, very concentrated, compact city where there's a lot of people staying together. And then if you look at the numbers in sort of outskirts, suburban, it's not as much. I'm not saying it's always true, but do you see that being Rio and Sao Paulo is the two biggest, most compact city, that these two are the worrisome areas where peripheral people are actually sort of a physical distancing all this while? Do you think that it's not hit as hard?
Yeah. Lockdown in the favelas is just absolutely impossible. I wouldn't blame a single person that lives inside the slums who says, sorry, but I can't stay in isolation. I mean, sometimes you have about 8 or 10 people living in a house that is just 20, 30 square meters.
Wow.
Right? It's crazy. I mean, that's not isolation. And then for you to arrive at your place, especially in Rio, sometimes the favelas, because they're on hills, steep hills,
Right.
you don't have main roads. You just have, stairways. So we're talking about 1 to 1.5 meters with of the stairways, and just a
Right.
bunch of people going up and down. It's just absolutely impossible, right? And if I had 8 family members here in my house, which is 4 times bigger than what I just said, I would kill myself.
But that sounds like a recipe for disaster. And what if let's say someone brings it back to the slum and starts spreading around? And do you think the healthcare system in Brazil can cope with it?
Yeah, the thing is, it already went to the favelas. That's a fact. And we have other problems as well in the favelas. We have a lot of TB. We have a lot of tuberculosis in the
Oh my,
favelas.
okay.
We don't really know how this is going to affect or not, even for asymptomatic patients that have
Right.
pulmonary tuberculosis. We don't
Yeah.
know how these two diseases will get along or not.
All
Um,
right.
and
It
so we
sounds
really don't know how this is
okay.
going to work. Um, the other thing here is that the public system. I'm really proud of the fact that Brazil has public welfare for all, but
Okay.
it is not as good, of course, as the UK, for example. So in São Paulo is really good.
Mm-hmm.
It is good, but
Mm.
if you go outside of São Paulo, then it's a bit tricky.
Right.
Then people are. I mean, I wouldn't want to go to a public hospital in the middle of the countryside in Brazil. That could be really dodgy. I mean, yeah.
You
So
used
it
to
is
you
going to
used
be
to work
complicated.
you used to work with one of the hospitals in the suburban area, right?
Oh well, yeah, I did some work, and I graduated in Hospital das Clínicas, which is, I think, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken, is the third biggest hospital in the world. It is
Right.
huge, and
Right.
it's a public hospital, but it does have some money, and that's where most of the research comes from. Very good doctors teaching there because it is good for their curriculum, and they like to teach, and this is a very good environment for students and for the patients, obviously. But the thing is, in Brazil, we have a mixed system. A lot of people go to private hospitals and a lot of people go to public hospitals. But you have the
Hmm.
good quality private hospitals and you have the bad quality private hospitals. So it is difficult.
Right.
The situation now, which worries me a lot, is that when our system fails completely, when we also have the economic problem coming up, you know, with
Right.
a lot of people being fired, people who are being fired are losing their health insurance that came from their firms.
Oh, right.
Then they become patients of the public health system.
Right.
And then it's more and more people adding up to the account. So it
Right.
is complicated.
That
Yeah.
I see. Right. And talking about economy and talking about practices. So you've been closed for 3 weeks, and how long do you foresee that this will go ongoing?
Difficult question. I mean,
Right.
the mayor, every 2 weeks, he comes up with another 2 weeks of lockdown,
Right.
which so far
Right.
so good. I completely agree.
Right.
So we should be in this situation for a few more weeks for sure of
Right.
complete lockdown.
Right.
The thing is that
And
having a good reason of how to, you know, for
right.
example, when I've been in isolation for over a month now, and
Mm-hmm.
when I go back, I won't see patients who are 60 plus with diseases. Of course not. You know, I need
Right.
to go back and then say, okay, young patients with no diseases, then you may come, and then in a few weeks or months, I'll say, okay, so the 60-year-olds without any diseases, then they can come. And I don't know
Right.
when I'll be able to say, okay, it's okay for uh, a patient who wants to do fillers or toxin or whatever with me,
Right.
but is a 70-year-old with diabetes. I mean, I don't know when I'm going to say, yeah, sure, next
Right.
Friday. It's
Yeah.
going to take
It
a
will take
while.
some time. It's gonna take some time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while.
But that's
Yeah.
me saying, I mean, a lot of people are already doing this.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they people who already started seeing patients game?
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm. And do you think that for the next we talk about economy being hit hard, and do you think that it will how long will it take before this real situation will become better? Do you think that it will drag until end of the year, the economy, the social economy in Brazil?
To be honest, I think it's going to take a lot longer.
Right.
I think that, for example, Italy is already showing major consequences to their
Right.
economy. I mean, unemployment rates are just going bizarre now in Italy,
Hmm.
and they are a much more well distributed country than we are. I mean,
Right.
Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, is the eighth or ninth biggest economy in the world,
Hmm.
but the disparity is ridiculous. I mean,
Right.
if you come to São Paulo and you go to a fancy neighborhood, you'll say, "Oh yeah, sure, I was in Manhattan last week, and it's pretty close." Not from an
Right.
architectural point of view, but money
Mhm.
wise.
Right.
But if you really go around Brazil, you're in a poor country. There's no
Right.
way you can say that Brazil is rich. The disparity is ridiculous. So even if we would say that it affected everybody equally, you know,
Yeah.
which it doesn't, uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
you would have people who have zero money going completely broke. So we
Exactly.
don't have the, um, we don't have anything to prevent us from a huge recession. I mean, in Italy, the economy is, I mean, it's not as rich as Brazil, but it's much more well distributed.
Yeah. And do you think that this crisis, this whole COVID-19 crisis, will do work as a reset to the society a little bit, sort of bringing people close to each
Well,
other, kind of reset the economy a little bit?
well, to be honest, I'm really pessimistic. I don't see. I say this because every now and then I make the huge mistake of reading what people are saying on Instagram. You know, on the WhatsApp groups of doctors here
Right,
in Brazil.
right,
It
right.
is a huge mistake, but every now
Mm,
and then I fall for that. And
mm,
people are really just worried about getting their money as soon as possible, you know, get their clinics running again. And it just it is just so sad because people are not, you know, they throw the memes and the jokes and videos, and I don't see anyone actually stopping, you know, and paying attention to what is going on
right.
and reading and, you know, making the best of their time now. It's the first
Mhm,
time in my life that I wake up without an alarm clock, you know,
right.
and
Uh,
it is the first time in my life for a long time now that
mhm,
I wake up and it's like, oh, what am I gonna do today? You know, because uh, 6 weeks ago I had so much stuff going on that if somebody said, okay, you're gonna be without any work for six
right.
weeks, can you manage to, you know, do
Yeah.
everything that you have to do? And I would
Right,
say like, no, I can't, and I really
right.
can't. But the thing is, um, now I'm starting to pay attention to things that I didn't pay attention before. You know, I made
Yeah, that's
sure
good.
the first week that I got home and I just looked at the ceiling and I was like, ah, what am I gonna do now? You know, I organized my
Right,
house. It took me
right.
almost a week to organize my house.
Well, that's a big, very big house there.
No, the house is not big. I'm a mess. That's the problem. Yeah.
But one thing I feel that the Latin culture, like the Latinas, Latinos, no matter how bad the situation is, somehow you just push through and things just happen. People are actually kind of optimistic in certain ways and make things fall through. And I think somehow I feel COVID-19 will be might be a blessing in disguise in certain ways that resets all of us. And maybe when we go through this hard times in eventually that people have more awareness towards health and also can have more insights. And I think that would be awesome. And I really hope that we can go to a new normalcy. We hope to have you in Asia sometime soon again. And then we definitely have to go and enjoy ourselves a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We
Yeah.
should, man.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's great talking to you.
Thank you,
And
man.
then yeah,
Yeah.
definitely want to come back, and then we definitely have to hang out.
We were seeing each other on events more often than I see my family here in Brazil. You know, it's kind of crazy now. I mean, we saw each other, I think, what, 3 times in 6 months, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know. Now with we couldn't travel, but yeah, we can still see each other
Yeah,
on
but yeah,
social media.
eventually things will improve, and I'm really looking forward to going to Asia again and
Right?
seeing you in the meetings, and we will
Definitely.
definitely learn something from it. You know, not
Yeah,
all of
definitely.
us, but hopefully some. Yeah,
It's always funny because it's through all this interaction that we talk, especially talking to experts and sort of exchange ideas. I think those are things that we miss a lot. Like Heidi was saying the other days, it's like we just want to be together. To maybe this time we cannot hug. We probably have to wear a lot of shields before we hug each other, but we'll be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Hope
man.
to see you. All right. Thanks for the lovely
Take care,
information.
man. Bye bye.
Best of.
Thanks for our
Yeah. I
talk.
hope everything goes well in Brazil.
Yeah,
Really,
I hope
stay safe
everything
and
goes
stay
well in
well.
Malaysia as well, man.
All right.
Take
Thank you.
care.
See you.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye.